Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'll start a new opening series today, and it will be on the Pirc Defense, which is a hyper-modern opening and a bit different to the stuff I've been covering so far. So the Pirc, often mispronounced as Pirc, or in Croatian Pirčevka, was named after Vasja Pirc, a Slovenian Grandmaster, Yugoslavian Grandmaster, so it should be called the Pirc Defense because he wasn't Vasja Pirc. Anyway, it's a hyper-modern opening in which, after e4, black plays the move d6. Now, this is quite a quiet move, and black is basically giving up the center to white, and black agrees to play in a hyper-modern fashion where he allows white to create a strong center and then crashes through it afterwards if he plays correctly. Now you are going to see that the opening bears a lot of resemblance with the King's Indian defense and with the Benoni in some cases, so all three have a similar idea of fianchettoing the bishop for black and striking through at white center with c5 and e5. So what black is basically doing after the move e4, d6 and white's normal continuation d4 taking the center, black hopes to develop his minor pieces, castle his king and then break open the white center. Now what white should do in response to this is simply oblige, create a strong center and try to keep it afterwards. Now, this will only be an introduction to the Pirc. I'm going to cover each variation you can see on the screen in detail in a separate video, and we are going to go over all the important lines. And here I'm going to try to give you the basic ideas behind the opening and just show you what each side can play. Now, the good news for white against the Pirc is that he gets to decide what type of game they are going to play, and very often white is the one who can decide whether it will be tactical, whether it will be positional, and what types of position will arise from the game. Now, the normal move after d4 is knight to f6, and white plays knight to c3 here. The move f3 has been seen, and this is called the lion defense now. This actually transposes, but it could also transpose into the 150 attack, which is the Pirc once again. So f3 is a straight sideline, so if you play the Pirc with the black pieces, you need to be prepared for this as well. I'm going to go over it in the 150 attack video, so on that variation, because it bears a lot of resemblance to it. But as I said, after d4, knight to f6, the main way to defend your pawn is with the knight, so knight to c3. And here, black enters the normal Pirc defense with the move g6. I would like to mention one move briefly, which actually transposes to the Philidor defense. And if you play e4 and you face the Pirc often, then you must have faced this move, and that's the move e5. And this, if white misplays it, leads to an endgame in which black is perfectly fine. I would argue even slightly better if you get tempted and take the pawn, so d takes e5, d5, queen d8, king d8. This is almost an improved Berlin for black because his c-pawns aren't doubled. He's actually challenging the e-file with his e5 pawn, and this is completely equal. The fact that black can't castle doesn't mean absolutely anything, and black is going to play c6, king to c7, develop normally and have a fine game. So this sideline with e5 should be met with knight to f3 simply declining, and now you have entered the Philidor defense after knight bd7, bishop c4, bishop at e7, etc. And I'm going to cover this in detail in the Philidor series. This is the lion variation, but as I said, don't be surprised if you enter this position. So after e4, the Pirc with d6, d4, knight f6, knight to c3. Black doesn't have to play the main move g6. Black can go for e5, and just remember not to take this pawn because the resulting endgame doesn't give white almost any advantage. And by the way, sorry, I'm just moving into a new apartment, so the recording setup is quite strange and I have a lot of stuff around, so I couldn't find the normal table. But anyway, let's get going. So after knight to c3, black plays g6. And as I said, black's idea is to allow white to create a strong center and then to fianchetto his bishop, castle his king, and open up the center, most commonly with c5, but with e5 as well. And hyper-modern openings haven't been popular really up until the 20th century. The Pirc has been played in the 19th century, but with varying success, not really that much success. And in the 1960s, it became popular and played commonly. Now, Bobby Fischer played it once against Boris Spassky in their 1972 match. Game 17 ended in a draw. And there are quite a lot of popular strong Grandmaster games which you can check out. So the first thing I would advise you to do is to look at 10 or 20 games just to have get a feel for the position. Now, as I said, White gets to decide what the opening will be like. White has 6 moves here, perhaps even more, but almost all other moves apart from these 6 are quite dubious. And from these 6 moves, 2 are the most popular, 2 are the main lines. The move f4 is the Austrian attack, and the move knight to f3 is the classical variation. Those 2 are the best for White, and those 2 are objectively the strongest way for White to play. Now, they're completely different. The move f4 is tactical, leads to very sharp positions in which White is going to attack as soon as possible. And the move knight to f3, the classical variation, with this move White is going for a slow, steady advantage, which, and in these positions Black can hardly equalize if White plays correctly. So I think that people who play the Pirc defense hope for f4 and something aggressive, because that gives them more chances, because the Pirc is a fighting opening. And if you dampen then their counterplay with knight to f3, which knight to f3 does perfectly, then players with Black, especially lower rated ones, often get confused and find their pieces cramped on the back row. So imagine the bishop being here, the king castle, the bishop either goes here or here, the knight goes to d7. So all of Black's pieces are stuck on the first 3 rows, and White can expand normally and almost create a perfect chess setup. Bishop e3, bishop d3, castle, queen to d2, rook to d1, rook to e1, and you have a position as if it came from a textbook, while on the other hand Black is cramped on the back row and still has to find some counterplay. The other lines which I'm going to go over are bishop to e3, which is a very, very, very aggressive setup, and c6 is the main move for Black here. White goes for d2. This is the so-called 150 attack. I have no idea why is it called that, and it's quite an unimaginative name, but still. And this setup basically is something like the Yugoslav attack, and White is going to play f3, castle long, play g4, h4, sec mate, the Bobby Fischer method. And I have to say this is one of my favorite ways to fight the Pirc defense. Another line which is quite popular is bishop to g5. This is the Byrne variation, named after Byrne, an American grandmaster. And this I wouldn't recommend, because I think this is, well, your bishop is going to end up on g3, and I can't really see a big advantage for White. After bishop g7, queen to d2, h6, bishop h4, g5, bishop g3. I mean, Black has sort of overextended his pawns on the king side, and it's going to be much harder to castle. But still, I think that you need your bishop on e3, and I would prefer to play other lines. One very interesting way for White to play is the move g3, the Sveshnikov system, and this doesn't really copy Black's plan, because even though both sides are going to fianchetto their bishops, White still has a broad center, and White can sometimes even continue with the move f4 and cramp Black's position down. So after bishop g7, bishop g2 castles, knight g2, e2, e5, h3. This position is quite playable for White, and I like it. It's unusual, and most people who play the Pirc defense aren't going to be used to this. And the last variation we are going to go over is bishop to c4, and this is the Kolmov system, and even though it's been played a long time ago, it's sort of a new idea to develop the bishop to c4, because normally the bishop goes to e2 and then to c4 in some lines, but this is a very aggressive setup with which White could have quick wins, and the bishop is of course much better on c4 than on e2. So let's say bishop g7, queen to e2, knight c6, e5, opening up the center, knight d7, knight f3. You can see that Black is sort of forced to go back, and White has a free hand in the center. And as in every chess opening, White isn't much better or anything, but if Black is uncareful, then he could get in trouble much faster than White, because White has more space, White has more activity, and White's king is at the end safer, because there aren't no Black pieces around it. So all of these 6 we are going to go over in separate videos. So the series is going to be 6 videos. And let me just go back to this position. So the Pirc defense is, well, myself as an e4 player, I like to face it because I think that black can go wrong much sooner than white can. Of course, if white isn't careful, then he could blunder. And several strong grandmasters have played it. I would want to name Yasser Seiravan in particular, who's played it for a long time, and you can check out a lot of his games. He brought numerous ideas to the theory of the Pirc, and his games are very instructive, and you should check out his games to see how to play this with the black pieces. And nevertheless, I prefer the position for white. Let's just go over some of the main lines. So f4, the Austrian attack, with the idea of basically bringing another defender to the center, so the move e5 can be played, but it doesn't work. And in the Austrian attack, one thing you have to remember is that once black plays the move e5, your general plan is to take with one pawn and then advance the other. You should never take twice. So after e5, let's say e5 here, even though it's not the best move, you either take here, or after e5 you take here. So let's say this happens. So in the Austrian attack, you basically want to be able to move one of your pawns forward, and that's why you use the third pawn. And it's the most aggressive setup against the Pirc. So black's most common move is bishop to g7. The move e5 here for white isn't really as dangerous. White continues with knight to f3, black castles, bishop to d3, and white develops his pieces before going to an attack. Knight to a6 is played instead of knight to c6 because this could be an annoying tempo, the move d5. Castles, c5, and here you can see what black is trying to do in the Pirc. Black has developed, black has castled, and now he's trying to undermine the center. And the only way for white to keep his center is to play the move d5. If white captures on c5, knight takes c5 is actually fine for black, and white doesn't have a huge advantage at all. So white has to play for an attack d5, trying to keep those pieces at bay. And now let's say bishop to g4, which is the main move. And white's idea is ideally to exchange this main defender in black's position and to advance the pawns when the position is favorable and when you manage to get an attack out of your advancing pawns. In the classical system, the story is quite different, and this is probably my second favorite system against the Pirc. I usually play the 150 attack with bishop e3, queen d2, but knight to f3 is the most solid way to play, and this is I'm not sure what is the main line now. f4 and knight to f3 have both been played thousands of times in grandmaster games, I think about equally. But knight to f3 is the most solid way. Bishop to g7, bishop to e2. As I said, you don't go to c4. Sometimes you do it later, but you need your bishop here because bishop to g4 is an annoying move. Castles. And here already you need to be prepared for sidelines. And there's a variation which I really don't like facing. I have played this against a FIDE master about a year ago or 2 years ago. He played c5 here immediately, opening up the center before I got time to castle. I took, and he played queen to a5, and he's going to recapture here with the queen. You really have to be careful. If I try to be greedy or something, then after this move my position is just losing. You can see that black has a lot of tricks in the Pirc, and you need to be careful from the start of the game. So let's say knight to f3, bishop g7, bishop to e2. c5 is already possible here, and you need to be prepared for that. So the Pirc is an opening in which black tries to lure you into his trap. He tries to put his king to safety and then break through your center immediately. But the main move isn't c5. It can happen, but castles, c6 here, and black is trying to develop, create a small center, and then opening it up later. c5 is possible here as well. d5 is the main move. So in most cases, when c5 is played, you need to close the position down. Now, ideally, you would like to do that in a way that it blocks down this bishop, which is really hard to do. So black has significant counterplay, but yeah, you need to be prepared to have nerves of steel with both sides here, especially with the black pieces, because if you get scared while playing the Pirc, if you panic, if you move your pieces backwards before it's necessary, then you are going to have a losing position. For example, in the Austrian attack after f4, bishop g7, knight to f3, castles. Here I would play bishop to d3, and one of my opponents moved his knight backwards, fearing e5. I've actually had in blitz games after knight to f3 my opponents moving their knight backwards. So you need to know when you have to move backwards and when you don't have to retreat, when the position is fine. And in that respect, the Pirc is a very complicated opening, and I hope I'm going to be able to explain all the variations thoroughly and in a way in which you can understand them. And I'm looking forward to that. Once again, a very complex hyper-modern opening, very popular nowadays, and even though you won't see it in every 2800 game or in World Championships, it's still a very viable defense for black. And if white doesn't know what he is doing, and if white is expecting something normal such as e5 or c5, then the move d6 can be a very strong surprise weapon. Now, one thing I would like to mention is that after e4 there's a defense very similar to the Pirc, and that's the move g6, which is the modern defense. And now after d4, bishop to g7, knight to f3, d6. You might think that this is the same as the Pirc, even though some people classify it as the Pirc modern defense. The modern is also known as the Robach. The modern defense is basically when black delays the development of the knight to be able to counter the move e5 better and to have more options available for him. So we are going to cover the Robach or the modern defense in a separate series because they are a different opening. Okay, everybody, I hope you got something from this video, from this introductory video on the Pirc defense. It's going to be 6 more videos with 6 main variations. Please do let me know what you think. Let me know if you want some other variations to be covered, some sidelines which you think are important. I might include them. And thanks very much. Thanks very much for watching, and stay tuned for more chess. See you later. Bye bye.